The county's Department of Animal Services hired an outside consultant to examine its two shelters and recommend improvements. The consultant was alarmed by what they found at the 50-year-old shelter in Bonita. Overworked employees were cleaning dog kennels using a hose while the dogs were still inside. Animal care experts contacted by KPBS were dismayed. The Association of Shelter Veterinarians calls the practice unacceptable.
Which means if you're doing this, you need to stop immediately.
But 2 years later, the shelter is still hosing down kennels with dogs inside.
The fact that they're still doing an unacceptable practice even after the audit highlighted that it really, paints kind of how much they're struggling there.
The audit also found dogs without beds, leaving them to sleep on concrete floors. KPBS confirmed during a recent visit to the shelter that the vast majority of dogs still do not have beds. Longtime animal law attorney Bruce Wagman says this should have been an easy fix.
No matter what the shelter, they should have beds. Everybody should have a bed. And that doesn't seem to me like a big expense or anything you can't do.
County spokesperson Tammy Glenn confirmed in an email that the audit never made it beyond the Animal Services Department. County supervisors and other officials did not receive a copy. In a statement, Glenn said, quote, "Some initial improvements were made based on the observations of the consultant during visits to the shelters, and the department looks forward to identifying additional opportunities."
And joining me now in studio is KPBS investigative reporter Scott Rott to discuss this story further. Welcome.
Thanks, Maya.
Alarming stuff, but this reporting builds on an investigation that you previously did last month that looked into dog euthanasia in San Diego County animal shelters. Can you remind us what that investigation found?
That's right. We looked at euthanasia rates for dogs in the county's two animal shelters, the one in Carlsbad and the one in Bonita. And what we found was going into the pandemic, the euthanasia rate at these shelters actually was starting to decline. Coming out of the pandemic, we found that there was a sharp spike among dogs, the euthanasia rate for dogs. It actually more than doubled. And so we found that last year, the euthanasia rate was 12% for dogs. It had dropped a little bit following that to about 10%. And we found that the majority of these cases were actually dogs that had behavioral problems. And a number of former employees and volunteers raised concerns to us about the rationale for euthanizing some of these dogs. Some of them, for example, were maybe growling at someone or had fear or maybe separation anxiety. And we just heard from folks that they were concerned that the rationale didn't always rise to the level of justifying a euthanasia.
I see. Now, how did you discover this audit from 2 years ago?
After our investigation came out, I had heard whisperings and murmurs that there was this audit out there, so I was digging around and I had asked the county for a copy of it. I didn't end up getting it from the county, but I did get it from another source. And when I got it, I was pretty surprised because it laid out a bunch of issues that we had seen weren't addressed. And so we wanted to dig into, well, what ended up happening with this audit and why weren't some of the most serious issues addressed in these last couple of years?
Now, based on your reporting, speaking of addressing, the county said that it made some improvements to the animal shelter operations based on that audit. So what were some of those?
That's right. So staffing was a big one. So the audit found that the staffing retention and the staffing rates just wasn't enough to support operating two shelters in the county. Last year, the staff turnover rate at the shelters was 70%. In the first 6 months of this year, it's down to 22%. So they're on a better trajectory. They also doubled the number of volunteers that are working with their foster program. So it's gone up to about 500 volunteers. They're still well short of how many animals that they want to foster or keep in foster homes. They want it to be at about 50%. They're well short of that, but they are expanding that program. They've also added toys and bones into the kennels for enrichment. And maybe the big thing is that they're building a new shelter, which is expected to be open in mid-2026, that'll replace the Bonita shelter. And it's supposed to be newer, state-of-the-art. And so I think the idea is that the kennel issues that we're seeing in Bonita won't be an issue at this new shelter.
Well, we certainly hope so. What else did experts tell you after they reviewed the audit?
So as you heard, some of those experts said these issues, they need to be addressed. And some of them, really without exception, they need to be addressed immediately. But they also said the shelter industry is really difficult and shelters are up against it. That's how one of the experts put it to me. They have a really hard mandate. One said that shelters are like the dumping ground for animals that people don't want. And yet the public has a high expectation for these shelters to treat them with dignity and to try to get them adopted out. So the experts said, yeah, there are issues here that need to be addressed, but also let's keep it into context. It's part of a bigger problem when it comes to animal welfare, and shelters, while they play an important role, it'll take a much bigger effort to try to address some of these problems when it comes to animal welfare.
Some really good points there, some great reporting, Scott. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maya.
And if you have a tip for KPBS's investigations team, you can send an email to investigations@kpbs.org, or you can message them on our secure signal line at the number that you see on your screen, 619-594-8177.